I actually searched for the term March blandness when I was looking for articles or sentiment on social media about people's disappointment with this year's March Madness tournament. And before I get too deep into that, I want you to know that no, this is not a sports account, but sports can be a valuable window into the culture of this country and even humanity in general. And I see this as one of those cases because, even though I'm gonna make some comments here about this NCAA tournament, what does this say about something larger? And people have jumped to some conclusions here, which I think are accurate, but I think that there's still bigger points we can make. So where they usually go with this is, well, first a lot of people agree this has been a boring NCAA tournament. It's called March Madness, and yet this one is making fun of it by saying March Blandness. This guy here talks about this being the most boring NCAA tournament. And I think that's just a general sentiment. There have not been a lot of upsets. Um, Even in the Final Four this weekend, it's the four number one seeds. There haven't been very many overtime games, not very many buzzer beaters, and I just think the vibe of the games feels a little different. And it's so that's a hard thing to put your finger on, but I think others are able to feel that as well, and they're coming to a similar culprit. They're pointing out that hey, there are no Cinderella teams, meaning the teams that are low seed that end up doing really well, through the tournament. Every year there seems to be one or two that is a real good feel good story because maybe several of the players have been on the same team for a number of years and they're able to take on some of the really big programs. Well, NIL means name, image, and likeness, and it's a way for players in college, whether it's football, basketball, maybe some other sports, to get some kind of compensation. Um, and some are getting a lot of money from this. Now, this one has to do with, star power or family power. But LeBron James' son got $6.4 million, but he's far from the only high profile player to get a lot of money while in college. 10 athletes are making over $1 million a year from NIL. So looks like there's a women's basketball, some football players here. So money has entered the picture. And while usually they attribute that to NIL, there have also been a couple of other things in college in the college game that I think have taken away some of the spirit from the game as well. That also have to do with money. One is the transfer portal. So players they might be on a team and they're just like, it's not working for me. I'm entering the transfer portal and I'm going to go to a team where I have a better chance of winning, where I have a better chance perhaps of making some NIL money. So there's less mm, dedication to the team that you're on and more about chasing something other than team spirit. In this case, winning or money. You also have something with the schools themselves, and that's realignment. So here we have UCLA and USC, two schools in Southern California, who this year, for the 2024 football year, joined the Big Ten, which has typically historically been a Upper Midwest regional conference. So Wisconsin, Minnesota, my home state, Ohio State, Michigan, etc. A few years ago, Maryland and Rutgers joined, which wasn't that crazy because Penn State was already involved and they're in Pennsylvania here. But still, it took us further east from what had been a Midwest and a little bit of Eastern geography. But now it's coast to coast, and other conferences are gaining schools as well, as you see from these lines. But the Big Ten is the craziest example because you've got literal coast to coast, and it broke up what was the Pac 12, I believe, or Pac 10, I can't remember, but it was all these schools along the Pacific coast, Pac 10 or Pac 12. California, Oregon, Washington, etc. And they all played each other. And there was a long historic rivalry amongst these schools, a regional rivalry, and now that's gone. It's easy to point to money as the culprit, and you could say, "Oh, it's capitalism. It's late stage capitalism, as some on the left might say. But it's true. Like when you have an an added element enter the picture, it's going to have an effect on the whole picture. It's like they say, if you pay your student, if you have children and you pay them to get good grades, sometimes their grades actually go down. Like there's been studies on this because now they have a different incentive to earn good grades. Just like if you pay people to volunteer, sometimes they prefer to volunteer, or they have more passion for the volunteering when they're not paid. Whereas if you give them some sort of compensation, now it's like, oh man, I'm doing all this work for a gift certificate or for a gift card. It's like, oh man, that's not very, So they start to think of it in different terms. When players are now making a lot of money, there's comparison. But even if there's not that, which of course there is, there's going to be just the element of, well, I'm this is a job, this is a profession. Where it was before, yes, there was scholarships, yes, there was the promise of big money down the road if they joined the pros, and maybe there was under the table stuff, but it was never so overt and it was never so lucrative as far as I know. Um, and so that just wasn't as big of a factor. And before you get like really upset with colleges, players, I don't know, anything like that, just remember that this is something that we asked for, which is funny because now the population seems to be complaining about the effects of money on college sports, but this is something that the general population asked for. Here's a cartoon that I dug up saying, both these people work for the university, only one gets paid. It's not fair that this PhD candidate teaches some classes, gets paid some cash, but yet this football player doesn't. Here's Chris Bosch. I don't know when he wrote this, but at some point he said it's madness that we don't pay college athletes. I mean, we bring in so much money for these programs, and the college presidents, the coaches, so many people make money off of the product we put on the field. Here's South Park making fun of it, going to the University of Colorado, Cartman did, and pretending to be a slave owner, like, oh wow, look at these slaves you have. It's such a wonderful program you have here. And it's a funny moment in South Park that making fun of that. So yeah, so we asked for this, but now that we have it, now that the country has its college students making money, and that has entered the picture, there's going to be a trade-off. You can't have the best of both worlds in any situation, and this is no different. So in this case, I think there's just an inverse correlation between, yes, students are making more money, the money's being distributed more, not just to the programs and to the college, and to the athletic directors and to the coaches. It's going to the players. Okay, great. Well, what's dropping? And we're seeing that money is a force that adds a kind of a it's a quantifiable result that gets rid of the unquantifiable. And those unquantifiable things are things like school spirit, like rivalry. And you have these like unquantifiable moments in the NCAA tournament throughout history. Here were the Wildcats doing really well one year. Oh, I remember this one, George Mason. Yeah, they were like a 12 seed or something, and they went like to the Sweet 16. That was maybe even like the Elite Eight, or maybe even the Elite Eight. That was really quite a run that they had that year. This year we have four number one schools in the Final Four, and there's nothing wrong with that on its face. But what there is something wrong with, I think, and I think most people agree, is that the tournament this year has just a lot less spirit involved. It's this displacement of the spirit of the cultural with money. And I think that speaks to just sort of how things are right now in the US. There's been a removal of these cultural, traditional aspects, and money is replaced.